Tama was once a knight who was killed at the hands of the demons, but after his death, he was reincarnated into the body of an S-rank behemoth capable of destroying entire nations in the blink of an eye. Or at least that's what his status screen says, but in reality, he just looks like a cat. Tama is glad he got a second chance at life, but he's a little conflicted about having become a monster, since his entire life as a human was spent slaying monsters. Just then, he notices an E-rank slime slowly making its way toward him, and he can tell that that thing is going to try to eat him, so he goes back to the status screen to pick a skill to defend himself. He unlocks the ability to fire rocks out of his mouth and uses it to kill the slime. But after his safety is ensured, he realizes he hasn't eaten at all since he got reincarnated, so he decides to try eating the slime. To the surprise, the slime actually tastes really good, and as an added bonus, he has the ability to absorb skills from monsters that he eats, so as a result he unlocks the ability to store items. After that, Tama decides to go through the rest of the dungeon to see what else he can eat, and since he's rank, none of the other monsters really stand a chance against him. Tama proceeds to slay all kinds of minotaurs, golems, and snakes to feed on them. And so far his life as a cat hasn't been so bad, so he could get used to living like this. At the same time, a very well-endowed elf girl has just arrived at the dungeon entrance to begin her day of adventuring back with Tama. He's still busy exploring his new home when he comes across a treasure chest in the middle of the room. He's really excited since this is the first time he has ever seen a treasure chest in person, so he rushes to open it and finds a massive gem inside. Unfortunately, the treasure chest turned out to be a trap, but instead of being a mimic, it teleports him into a hidden boss room. Tama now finds himself on the back of an earth dragon, and unlike the other monsters, this one is S-ranked, just like him, so he's not going to be able to one-shot it like the others. The earth dragon mocks Tama for daring to set foot in her lair, and says she's going to kill him, but Tama was literally born an hour ago, so if he's not going to let himself die so easily. He tries using his rock attack, but since this is an earth dragon, the attack literally bounces off his back and hits the roof, creating a small hole. The dragon tries to slash him, so Tama uses his iron body skill to try and defend himself, and while he does manage to survive, the slash still severely injures him. The dragon is impressed that Tama is still alive after taking one of her hits, but he's still too weak to defeat her, so she lunges forward to try and finish him off. However, at the last moment, Tama activated a flight skill, slashed out the dragon's eye with his tail, and then flew out through the ceiling hole. Tama is losing a lot of blood from his injuries, so he's trying to get out of the dungeon so he can find a safe place to rest before he ends up passing out. He's right next to the exit, but he eventually succumbs to the blood loss and collapses to the ground. Just then, he notices something approaching from around the corner, and since he can't move anymore, whatever that thing is, we'll definitely be able to kill him once he is spotted. Luckily for him, it was the elf girl who came around the corner, and as soon as she saw the near lifeless body of a cat, she rushed over to help him. Tama wakes up a couple of hours later and finds himself lying in bed with his wounds bandaged up. He's confused and wonders where he could be, but then the elf girl comes in with a bowl of milk for him. He remembers seeing the elf girl just before he passed out, and he's amazed by how beautiful she is as well as the spine strength she must possess to be walking around with those massive OP. She's relieved to see that Tama is awake since his wounds were pretty severe, and in all honesty, she has no idea how a little kitten like Tama could have ended up in the middle of the dungeon like that. Tama realizes that the girl thinks he is just a regular cat instead of a behemoth, which is why she's taking care of him like this. He can't talk, so he can't exactly tell her that he's really a behemoth. But even if he could, why would he want to when he gets to sleep on her chest at night? Over the next few weeks, the elf girl continues to take care of Tama until he's fully recovered from his wounds. One day, Arya heads out as usual, and while she's gone, Tama thinks about how grateful he is for what she's done for him. She not only nursed him back to health, but she also gave him food to eat and let him sleep in her bed in order to pay her back for her kindness. Tama swears that no matter what happens, he's going to make sure he protects that girl with his life. To ensure her safety, Tama decides to follow Arya into the dungeon so he can keep an eye on her and sneaks onto the boat before it leaves. Once they get to the dungeon, he begins quietly following Arya while staying hidden, and he's a bit worried that she will get herself into some kind of weird situation like losing her clothes to a slime or something. So he prepares himself to jump in at the first sign of trouble. However, as Arya comes across a group of goblins, she activates her acceleration skill and cuts the goblins down with very little effort. She then bends down to collect the goblin ears so she can claim the reward later, and after seeing her display, Tama is really impressed. He knows a lot about sword fighting since he used to be a knight, so he can tell just how amazing Arya's speed is. Just as Arya finishes storing her goblin ears, she notices another goblin staring at her from behind a corner, so she gets back into her battle stance. She's already killed enough goblins to meet her quota for today, but if a goblin insists on attacking her, then she's just going to have to take it down as well. However, something she failed to realize was that this is no ordinary goblin. There's actually a goblin mage, so it launches a massive fireball at her, and Arya wasn't prepared to deal with that, so she's in some serious danger right now. Tama doesn't want to let her get hurt, but he can't use any of his overpowered skills without revealing that he's a monster, so instead he pushes Arya out of the way and slashes the goblin mage with his regular kitty paws, causing it to stumble backward and fall down the dungeon stairs to its doom. Arya doesn't understand why or how Tama managed to get here, but she's grateful that he saved her. So on the ride back to town, she lets him lay on her triple Bs while she tickles his belly, and Tama is absolutely loving it. Once they make it back to town, Arya heads to the Adventurers Guild so she can submit her goblin ears, but on her way to the reception desk, she gets stopped by Lord Casman. She's met him before, but she was trying to avoid him since he keeps trying to convince her to join his party. Arya tries to politely decline his advances, aware of Casman's reputation for being a scumbag, but he is unyielding and tries to take advantage of her. However, before any cheeks could be grabbed, Tama bites Casman's hand and latches on tight to teach him a lesson. Casman screams out in pain and flails around until he eventually gets Tama off his hand, but then Tama lands on his face and begins scratching him up before going back to Arya's chest. Casman is enraged and is about to draw his sword to attack Tama, but before he could take a swing, his sword is grabbed by the guild master, Arya, otherwise known as Arnold Holzeniger. No relation. He reminds Casman that the guild has rules against brandishing weapons, especially when it's for a reason as pathetic as beefing with a cat, so there are going to be major consequences for him if he continues. Casman doesn't want to mess with Arnold, so he immediately runs out the door, and Arya begins thanking him for helping her out. He tells her it's no big deal and compliments Tama for sticking up for Arya when he bit Casman's hand. Arya then heads to the reception desk, and Arnold documents all monster parts to officially complete Arya's quest, and afterwards Arya takes a seat at one of the tables so she can spend some quality time with Tama. So far things have been fairly wholesome, but Arya is starting to give off weird vibes because while tickling Thomas's stomach, her finger starts to drift down to his balls, and she looks a little too excited about tickling her cat's balls. A little while later, Arya is getting ready to take a bath, and she plans to bring Tama with her, but Tama has his honor as a former knight to uphold, so he refuses to let himself do something as indecent as get in the women's bath. Well, Tama ends up in the bath with Arya anyway, and while in there, Arya begins talking about her desire to grow stronger. Years ago, her village was nearly destroyed by demons, but the sword saint, Alicia, appeared and slayed them all, saving the village, and ever since then, Arya has been trying to become strong like her. The next day, Arya is heading to the guild with Tama again, and Tama can tell that she's well liked by everyone in town since they are all so nice to her. She makes it to the guild and greets Arnold at the reception desk, but Arnold tells her that today isn't a good day to be here, so she should get out of here quickly. Unfortunately, before Arya could follow Arnold's advice, Casman shows up and proudly announces that after he got injured by her cat, he went and tattled to the Baron, so he was given a special order saying that Arya's pet cat is to be put down. Arya is astounded by the information she is receiving, as Tama is of great importance to her, despite the fact that she has only known him for a short period of time. Consequently, she is unable to allow him to be killed. She falls to her knees and begs Casman to have mercy, and Kasman intends to take full advantage of the Arya's desperation, so he proposes that the two of them have a duel. If Arya wins, then Kasman will let Tama live, but if Kasman wins, then he will make Arya his wife. This is in no way a fair deal, especially since Kasman is higher rank than Arya, but Arya has no choice if she wants Tama to live, so she's forced to agree to the terms of the duel. He then kicks her in the side, and after she stops, he compliments Arya on her speed, but that won't be enough for her to beat him. Arya tries to switch tactics and throws several daggers at him, but Kasman has a knife-proof cape, so he's easily able to block it. He's in charge at Arya and begins putting pressure on her by repeatedly striking with his sword until he eventually disarms her. Now that Arya can no longer defend herself, all hope is essentially lost. Tama is incredibly conflicted right now because if he does nothing, then Arya will be forced to marry Kasman. But if he uses any of his skills, then the people will realize that he's a monster. Kasman is about to land the final blow to force Arya to surrender, but before he could land it, Tama makes the decision to defend Arya at all costs. So he jumps in front of the blade and uses his iron body skill to break it.
Iron body!
Afterward, he used a house skill to send Kasman flying into some nearby trees. And by coincidence, Kasman's sword happened to fly in that same direction, and it's aimed straight at his balls, so he's going to have a bad time after what just happened. Everyone in the crowd begins murmuring amongst themselves because they know they just saw the cat use skills. Tama knew this would happen, and now that everyone has seen him use skills, it won't be long before they figure out that he's a monster, and then he will definitely be killed. But even so, he's satisfied with this outcome because he at least managed to defend Arya. Arya and Arnold walk up to Tama, and since they've seen him use skills, they start talking about what he could be. But instead of coming to the conclusion that he's a monster, they firmly believe that he must be an elemental cat. Anyway, Arnold declares Arya the winner, and things go back to normal. So Tama gets to continue his life as an overpowered cat with the most comfortable bed in the world. I appreciate you viewing my anime recap, Unruly Family. Please let me know what you think about this anime recap by liking, sharing, and commenting, and please subscribe to the channel to help us reach 5,000 subscribers.
Take you